All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, December 18th, 2025 Regional Advisory Council meeting. And Madam Chair, we do have a quorum. And so I will invite you to begin with introductions and we'll get started.
So we will start with those online. I don't think we have any members that are online.
So, Madam Chair, I think the phone number who is online is Sheila Williams.
Oh, okay. Okay, Sheila, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, and we can try to work on getting her.
Okay.
Unmuted.
So we'll start with the members that are here at the meeting, and I think we will start down at this end. Clark?
That right, Clark Becker. I member of the Teller Senior Coalition and member of the REC.
Thank you. Gordon?
Gordon REC, City of Mountain.
Laura Chronic, Town of Monument.
B. Babbitt, Northern El Paso County. Rosemary Jaramillo with the Alzheimer's Association.
Don Kobleski from Falcon, representing Eastern Plains.
Great. And I think the rest of you are staff.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And I'm Debbie Levenstein-Kivitz, the chair for my last remaining meeting. Thank you. And let's go back to those online. And it's Sheila, you said? Sheila, could you introduce yourself?
Hello.
There's somebody that's saying,
Yeah.
tell her.
Technology evades me.
So, Sheila, just letting you know, your mic is working. We can hear you. At least we're hearing rustling in the background.
You can hear me?
Yes, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Well, this is Sheila Williams, and I'm really trying to be at the meeting, but I'm on my stair chair lift, and I will have to mute if I can figure out how to do that so that I can get downstairs for the meeting. Okay?
Okay, great. So that's number one. We're going to go to number two, which is agenda approval. But before we approve the agenda, there have been some major changes, and Jody's.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a couple of agenda items to adjust in the agenda for today. We want to make you aware of. We are asking to add a public comment to 6B. If you look at your agenda for today, we have the 6A membership subcommittee vote and then 6B with the TRS funding recommendations. We are asking to add a public comment period immediately after 6B. So that will actually be two public comment periods, Madam Chair. One, the first in the general public comments in number 4, but then specific to, if there are items specific to 6B, we'll have a public comment period there. And that will happen between my presentation of the funding recommendations and then before we take the vote on it. So that is one item. The other is that we are dropping item 6C, the 2026 officer vote, as we don't have that completed as of this morning. So that it's not ready to be voted on. We will bring that back as an action item in January if that is ready to go. So, Madam Chair, that is the adjustment that those are the two adjustments that I'd like to present before the vote.
So now we can approve the minutes if we can have a motion to. That's what I'm at. Motion to approve. Okay, so if we can motion to accept the agenda.
I move to, this is Laura Chronic, I move to accept the agenda as modified.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Warden Rick, I second the motion.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Great. No discussion at this time or anything else? Okay. Then we will move on to consent items. And the first thing under consent items is a motion to approve the minutes from the previous RAC meeting. Do I have a motion to, first to accept?
This is Laura Craig. I move to accept the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
This is Bee Babbitt. I second that.
Right, and then if we can have a vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. And now we are going to talk about public comments, not related to the TRS funding options.
Correct. These would be general public comments about any topic not on the agenda.
We have,
Do we have anyone online who may have a public comment in general, not related to agenda items? See, Chair. Is this a general item or related to funding? There's 6B. Okay, general. Okay, great. Just coming to the so for those of you online who may not be able to see, this is Jason DeWeno with Silver Key for public comment.
This is for general comment, and I'll share first that our marketing team will be beside themselves what I'm passing around because I put this together, which is why I was running. Thanks, Aaron, for getting me on the agenda here very quickly. So what it is that I want to share with you that the AAA support and the community support for Silver Key has set forward so many things over the years to be in action and reaction to the needs of the community. One of the areas that Melissa just attended recently with me, it was a conversation related to a new affordable housing project that we are establishing in the Old North Point. In that new property, one of the things that's come forward is that there's a whole lot of history in the Old North End related to people who've been part of the community for many, many years, decades actually. Some of them are actually connected in the past, as you were, Jody, myself, others, to Mickey Kreschauer. Mickey Kreschauer was the original CEO of Silver Key. And so in talking with the Old North End, one of the things that we were just trying to flesh out is they have a real strong belief that the organization Silver Key has such strong roots in the community. But one of the questions that they brought forward is, what does this mean for housing in terms of the Old North End? So what they did is they invited us to be able to have conversations with this organization called the Old North End Neighborhood, and it's a group of different community members that bring feedback and understanding about what the architecture of the community is. How do you keep the integrity of the community as much as possible? Side note, across the street from where we're looking to do this is a retail shop, which is a tattoo company, the lawnmower repair, and our iconic Tasty Freeze. So I think we've got a nice balance to what we will bring to the community versus what the community is asking for related to some of the architectural design. But the reason why I want to take just a quick 3 minutes here and speak more generally is that while all the support that comes forward for Silver Key is in our core service area, and we so much appreciate that, one of the things that I want to bring forward is that for us to be able to address the lower income population that we serve in affordability, we are going to do our best to be able to raise $850,000 from the community through foundations and support. That's to be able to match the same level of area median income, the low income housing that we have at our current property at Murray and Fountain, and then the one on Hancock as well. So 850,000 is our target from foundations, community, that support. But what we are also establishing is this Mickey Kreschauer Legacy Fund for Affordable Aging in the Old North End. Our marketing team would hate that long sentence. I'm sure we'll come up with something when I give them a chance. But nonetheless, this particular effort is to be able to bring forward opportunity that if you knew Mickey, if you wanted to be able to help us achieve a new way to think about what an older, an integration of an affordable housing property in the Old North End to be, that could give us some resource to be able to reduce the AMI in the community, plus expand the visibility and the connection through the community that makes sense. So I want to pass this forward. In the top right is donate at. You would be able to designate for this this legacy planning that we're doing for Mickey. Mickey set the stage for so many things that happen in this community. I'm grateful to her. I was a friend for many years to both her and her husband. And I just want to thank you for giving 3 minutes of general information, and look forward to you signing in to donate and helping us get to an affordable property that makes sense. Thanks. No, in fact, we've invited them to be able to do a community partner and benefit. Yeah, we're good.
Thank you so much, Jason. Yeah, we got copies.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
We're now going to move ahead. Thanks for letting me just speak to you all this morning. I Fitness to Drive received grant funding, so I wanted to report back and talk about how that helps us serve older adults in this community and talk a little bit about what we do. Just a little intro on me. My name is Terry Cassidy. I'm an occupational therapist and certified driver rehabilitation specialist, the owner of Fitness to Drive, where our headquarters is here in Colorado Springs. We also have locations along the Front Range. We have worked with CDOT as well for some of our educational support, and then funding through PPACG. I want to get into like details of the driving evaluation and the clients that we work with, but I want just a little bit of background regarding why driving. And probably a lot of you know, assuming that most people here are drivers or got here by car today. But really, when we're thinking about driving, it has a different meaning to us a lot of times than other things in our normal day. So driving has been, like in this research study, identified as the most valued instrumental activity of daily living. So activity that we do every day for a lot of older adults, for the majority. These things on the screen here are the things that people like to do. So these were the top responses for like, why do you want to be able to drive? To be able to participate in religious and spiritual activities, participate in exercise, travel to visit people, and going out to eat were the top reasons for driving. And I feel like it's important just to acknowledge that driving often is not just transportation. So not just a place to get from A to B, but for a lot of people we work with, it's a part of their identity. And maybe that shifts over time and needs to, but it's why it's so hard to give up, I feel like. And also, it's highly linked to independence. So a lot of people really feel that that's a big part of who they are. And just to mention here that driving is not in its own category entirely. So a lot of what we do every day, if people are having trouble in those things, it's likely that driving may become problematic too. So things like managing finances, managing medications, cooking a complex holiday meal, for example, those can be triggers or reasons to wonder about driving also. And then just a note, there has been research about falls and crashes. So people who've had a fall in the past 6 months were 40% more likely to be involved in a motor vehicle crash. So not a causal reason, but there are probably factors that affect both of those things. So just putting that out there as a public service announcement for us just to be aware, and something we're looking at just even with people that we love. A little tiny bit here about the DMV. In Colorado, there's not a whole lot legally in terms of guidance for people returning back to driving after a medical incident or people who are aging and maybe have some functional changes that could impact driving. So when we look at like what are the requirements for driving, it's really around vision. And this is true in a lot of states. Basically 20/40 vision in at least one eye is the only requirement. There's not a law about seizures in the state of Colorado. There's not a law about a lot of other medical events and things. And that's where some of our CDOT funding comes in, is we're doing a lot of advocacy two medical professionals to recommend that they are also addressing driving or looking at driving. There's no, what's the word? There's no medical review board in the state of Colorado. So there's kind of this gray area, I would say, a lot of times when it comes to aging and driving. This is a one piece. So Colorado is considered a self-report state. Some states have mandatory reporting. So if somebody was admitted to the hospital with a stroke, the DMV would be notified. That does not happen in Colorado. This is the like wording of the self-report part. So if any of us go to renew our license, there'll be a couple statutory questions that were asked. This is one of them. During the last 2 years, have you had any physical, mental, or emotional condition that would interfere with your ability to operate a motor vehicle safely, including heart problems, diabetes, paralysis, epilepsy, seizure, lapses of consciousness, or dizziness, which is a good starting list, I would say. There's nothing about any neurological issues. There's nothing about memory changes. There's nothing about dementia. This has been on the books for a long time. But so that's currently where it stands in terms of the state saying, yep, it's self-report. Somebody, when they come to renew their license, can and should report something there. We are really trying to help people understand that they can get medical clearance before they get to the stage of renewing their license. So that's just kind of the background, and I'll pause there. Does anybody have questions about what I've said or anything about the legal side of it? There's a, yeah.
So Clark Becker, what I thought I heard you say is there's nothing right now that requires a medical practitioner that recognizes someone's vision that, like mine is 20/80 in one eye and 2100 in the right eye, to tell me that I shouldn't be driving. Something I already know, and it's in your best interest that I'm not. But
I appreciate that.
so that's what you're saying is that they're not doing that, right?
Two things. So it's not mandated. That is correct. They are often doing it, so there is the piece of like, and we're trying to help medical providers know what the recommendations are. And there are medical reporting forms, but it's optional on the doctor's side. One of our, I think one of the examples I'll talk about here, but if you go to the DMV and you can't pass the vision test, they will then ask for doctor's information. So it's not only self-report. Like vision is one of the things that they test at the DMV. They don't test memory. They don't test, any other cognitive skills, which some states are starting to do that. So there's variety among the states, but it's not required for Colorado medical practitioners or eye doctors. Yes. Thanks. I have a question. So you only have to renew your license at 5 years. Okay, 5. They changed it. So during that time, go to your doctor. And I have a neighbor that this has happened to, and the neighbor says you have some dementia, you shouldn't be driving, and he has agreed. He's not driving anymore. But I would imagine there are people that just don't listen to any of that. Does the doctor have to report that? Again, they're not required. And like you're saying, their license is good for 5 years. This question is saying in the past 2. So you could have had a stroke 4 years ago and then just say, nope, it hasn't happened. And there's reasons why it's only 2 years. It doesn't all match up. But so there's the like legal side of like who's required to report. But then there's also the just ethical side of like you're talking about someone agreeing, saying, I think this probably is the best idea. And then there's a lot of in between of like, I don't think my mom should drive, but maybe my mom thinks she should drive. Or the doctor is questioning it, but the kids are like, well, I was in the car with her yesterday and she was fine. So that's, I feel like where we come in is that area of sometimes disagreement or sometimes just questioning, is this the right decision? I mean, obviously it's not just about legal, right? Like there's a lot of risk with driving. And so there's the danger to oneself and others is a big part of it. And specifically with dementia, what the research shows is not as much causing accidents, although that does happen. but getting lost while driving and driving to another state. And maybe not being found in time. Like, so, I mean, there is significant risk to that individual aside from the crash. So would you recommend that that individual maybe come to you if mostly what the doctor's saying is dementia, to find out exactly what's going on? And I don't think he's ever in the car alone. I think he's with his wife who doesn't have dementia issues. My recommendation, and we'll talk about this a bit, but my recommendation, especially if there is a medical diagnosis on the book, so to speak, like in your medical record, it could be Parkinson's, it could be MS, it could be dementia, is to get clearance from your doctor. And so when I worked in the hospital setting, that would be my first recommendation. Talk to your doctor about driving. Oftentimes you have to be the one to bring it up. Sometimes it's the spouse bringing it up. And then say, I feel like I'm fine to drive. What do you think? Like having somebody clear you, it's really a doctor decision at that point. A lot of times, and in one of the examples I'll mention here, the doctor is like, well, I don't really know. I didn't drive with you. I'm not about to drive with you. Let's send you to somebody who will do this full evaluation. So yes, thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Terry, we do have Sheila Williams with her hand raised online.
Oh, thank you. Sheila, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Sheila Williams. I just wondered, I know our insurance rates in Colorado are pretty high. Does this lack of attention to senior driving, and I won't just call it seniors, I think they ought to test some of our younger drivers who are not doing a good job. But
Sure.
anyway, does a lack of this kind of requirement raise our insurance rates, and does the insurance industry have any requirement?
That's a great question. I don't know. I'm not sure on that, honestly. In terms of, I have heard of one insurance company that will pay for somebody to come get a driving evaluation. To me, it makes sense if you're insuring this person that you make sure they're safe if they have a diagnosis. But in general, it's not a service that's covered by medical insurance or auto insurance. But in terms of your question about auto rates, that's possible, but I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. So this is what we do. As occupational therapists, we take a holistic view of drug. So I'm going to start with somebody we'll call Johnny. He's 81 years old, lives by himself, has a diagnosis of Parkinson's, diagnosed about 3 years ago, still doing pretty well, not using a walker or adaptive equipment, living by himself. He didn't pass the eye test at the DMV, and most of this information I took directly from the report that the therapist wrote up. So at the DMV, if you don't pass the eye test, they give you a form. And they say, have your doctor fill out this form before I can renew your license. So that gets a lot of people just go to their doctor, which is great. He went to his doctor, and his doctor said, I want you to go have a formal evaluation before I feel comfortable signing off on this, given what's going on medically. So I'm going to go through kind of what the evaluation looks like on our side. It's a 3-hour session. We do break that up into 2 sections sometimes, but a lot of times we do it all at one go. And so we are looking at vision, not just visual acuity like they test at the DMV, but we're looking at contrast sensitivity, which can be really related to safety, as well as a lot of other just binocular vision skills. Looking at visual motor reaction time, multitasking, sensory motor testing. There's always cognitive assessments, but we have some specifically that we'll do if there's a mild cognitive impairment or a dementia diagnosis. Or if we see a lot of people with a vision field cut maybe from a stroke, and so we may do specific testing depending on what we're seeing. Next step is we got in the car. So I had that picture of the car earlier. We have vehicles that we can put adaptive equipment in. So we work with people who need hand controls, for example, or something like that. But we also always have a brake on the passenger side. So that's safety requirement. People are always like, I really want to drive my car. And we explain to them even before they come that they will have to drive our car, and that's for everyone's safety. That's why we're doing that. And we're in the car for about an hour. So we will start in a neighborhood situation and just slowly progress as we feel safe, as the individual feels safe. We're only going to have them drive in environments they would typically drive. So we do work with a lot of people who are like, I never go on I-25. We're not going to take them on I-25. So we're trying to look at a bunch of different things. We have a standard route, but we will also involve some wayfinding. So if somebody lives nearby or goes to church nearby or has, is familiar with some of the areas, we may have them navigate, or we may just have them find a gas station on our route or things like that. So trying to build in that cognitive piece is a big part of it. And then we come back, have the discussion. We do ask that the clients do not drive themselves to the evaluation, which to me seems self-evident, but a lot of people really don't have a lot of options. And so we end up with family a lot of times at the evaluation. So then we can sit down and have this discussion. And I will say sometimes just that environment is super helpful for families because driving is a touchy subject. And so for a lot of people, they maybe are concerned about their spouse, but they're not going to talk about it anywhere at home, anywhere that's going to like that energy is going to stay there. So, I worked with somebody who was like, we really only talk about driving at a doctor's appointment because it's such a potentially tricky issue. Basically, our recommendations are either going to be fit to drive, unfit, or we talk about time for driving cessation, or continue driving or get back to driving with certain restrictions. And those restrictions can be added to the license that has to go through the doctor to approve those, but we are recommending that on a pretty regular basis as well. So getting back to Johnny, and this is small print, I'm sorry, I'll read through here. I just wanted to share all of the recommendations here to just share that it's not just about pass or fail. Like, should this person drive or not drive? So the recommendations were do not drive at night, don't drive in inclement weather, stay within Colorado Springs, don't drive if you're feeling off. So he has Parkinson's, and a lot of people really, the medications affect how they feel hour to hour. And so that was an important one, that self-awareness piece. Recommending a reevaluation, which is frequently a recommendation of ours if someone has a progressive diagnosis. But then the rest of these are more lifestyle things. Request a handicap placard so that you can park in handicap spots. Obtain a fall detection alert necklace or smartwatch with fall detection. So that's just for him for safety. Inquire with the Capable program and Brothers Redevelopment for aging in place, home modification options, which is great to have resources within this group. And then start looking at alternative mobility planning. So a lot of times we're having this conversation of today, we passed, we have these recommendations. Also know that it's going to change. And so starting to help people make a plan for the future, what is that going to look like? Giving them resources to start that while they're still driving. One other one. Questions though based on this? Another example, turns out is around the same age, 82-year-old male, lives alone. He has a diagnosis of dementia. His daughter lives out of state, so she manages his finances remotely. He does have somebody who comes in on a daily basis and helps with dinner. He was somebody who had been seen by us 2 years prior and then came back for a reevaluation. So we were able to kind of look at how things had progressed in that time too. He was, again, it was his doctor who kind of initiated this, and his doctor basically asked him not to drive until he came to see us, which sometimes happens, and I think it's great when that happens. And I think, this was noted in the chart, but I think it is important that he did that because people can ask you not to drive, but a lot of people feel like they have no choice. So he did abide by that. And he also was found to be fit to drive, driving to familiar locations. In the past, he had done a ton of driving, drove out of state, all of those things. So they have the discussion of not driving out of state or to unfamiliar locations. However, there's this note on the second bullet. He may not remember that he's only supposed to drive to places he knows. This is really tricky. And And so there's the, he might need oversight by a family member or a caregiver. He does have a caregiver coming in on a daily basis. So that part is helpful in terms of this. But this is where we may send this to the doctor and say, it's up to the doctor to decide at this point. Like, is this too much risk? Like, we often explain to our clients that as occupational therapists, we make recommendations. We don't report directly to the DMV. The DMV is not allowed to accept reports from anybody except a medical doctor or an eye doctor. So a lot of times we're giving all the data and then kind of handing it back to the doctor too to help with decision making. So part of the discussion here was having a tracker on the client's vehicle to help know if they are following their restrictions. I will say there are a lot of people that we see that really just drive to 3 locations and they will stick to those 3 and are fine with that. So the familiar locations is tricky, but it does happen. In terms of the restriction on the license, we can't just say familiar locations because then if they did get pulled over and the officer's like, how do I know what's familiar for you? So more likely these days we're doing like a miles from home radius, and that's something that can be added to the driver's license. So my next slide is just kind of a summary of, so this fiscal year, clients that we've seen through the AAA grant. So we've done 18 evaluations, ages range 61 to 87, average of 76.9. 9 of those individuals had either a mild cognitive impairment or a dementia diagnosis. 4 had a diagnosis of Parkinson's, which was high. I was surprised by that. I would say pretty much all of the individuals with Parkinson's also tested in the mild cognitive impairment range. Like there's definitely overlap in these categories. The others, someone who's coming to see us after a seizure, after a brain injury, and somebody who had macular degeneration. So vision was the primary reason that they were coming. 8 of those passed. 8 passed with restrictions, and 2, we recommended cessation of driving. And just a second on that. So if we're recommending that somebody stop driving, again, we don't report that to the DMV, but we do always have a doctor's referral before we see somebody. Our report always goes back to the doctor with all the forms filled out for them to send that in to the DMV to make that happen. But I also feel like it's the family more than the law that enforces a lot of these decisions around driving. And so having the family there for that discussion, oftentimes the adult child will say, Dad, can you repeat back to me what her recommendation was? I mean, we have excellent family support a lot of times, and they're very involved in the conversation. And to me, that's key because they're the ones who are really going to know people can still get in a car if their license isn't valid. And so sometimes having family members really involved is essential. I just have a couple of considerations. I mentioned adaptive equipment. So we do help people continue driving if they have neuropathy, for example, something we see a lot, but their sensation in their hands is good. So we see people change to hand controls, driving with their hands. Sometimes after an amputation, we'll see that. We are recommending reevaluations, which I mentioned, and then just some information. I do shout out for this guide. Hopefully you guys have all seen it. They're available here. This is something we put together with the CDOT funding, Colorado's Guide for Aging Drivers and Their Families. If you would like some for your organization, let me know. They're free, and we love to just get the information out there. Because again, driving is a topic that I think people sometimes avoid if they can, either in the medical realm or the social realm. And we are just trying to make it more of a commonplace conversation. So that's what I have. Happy to answer any questions. I have a question. Let me stay up. Sure. So we have 4 offices. So we have 7 occupational therapists that are all part-time. Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to share a personal story if I could related to this presentation.
Absolutely.
I had an eye exam about 5 10 years ago, and I was losing my peripheral vision. Afraid I was going to lose my license. Fortunately, found out that peripheral vision is affected by your eyelids. Your muscles on your eyelids get too weak, it falls down, and when it covers your cornea, that affects your peripheral vision. So fortunately, I was able to go and have an operation to where they essentially cut into my eyelids and tightened up the muscles, and I was able to regain that peripheral vision. So for all of you here and listening, if you have are losing your peripheral vision, don't lose hope. Please check with your doctor and your ophthalmologist and see if you can get some help that I can. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Alyssa?
I just want to put a reminder out for folks. Part of why Terry is here this month is because the holidays are a time when families are getting together and they're often seeing each other, and that brings up the driving question. And so it turns out that December, I think it's the first week of December, is kind of older driver awareness week kind of thing. So that's why Terry is here in December, closing out the year for the RAC. And I think that's kind of interesting. When I talked to Terry earlier, she reminded me why older driver week happens in December around the holidays.
Thank you, Terry.
I have a question. Okay, in your presentation, you said grant funding clients. Now, is there a cost to anyone that was not funded by a grant?
Yeah, good question. The majority of clients that we see are paying privately to come see us. So the evaluation is $540 for the 3-hour evaluation. And for a lot of people, that works out great. And then for a lot of people, as you know, that's not something they can do. So that's where this funding has been amazing. We have not found other sources of funding, even at our other offices along the state. So I super appreciate this organization for making that possible. And the way that usually works with our clients is that they will call in. Like, some providers know, so they will say, ask about the grant funding when you call. But also, if we're talking to somebody and they are sharing their story that they really want to come, but this is not something that they can financially make happen, and we will offer that funding. So it really is great. And we also give the option of, you could pay for part of it, and grant will use that. Not the grant pays for the whole thing, but they're basically making a donation for a future client. So that has people have taken this up on that as well. Thank you. Any other questions? Great, thank you, Terry. That was really enlightening. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to 5B, our membership subcommittee. I just want to ask Melissa, Jen isn't here. Do you have anything just that you want to add? I know we're going to do more under action items.
We'll wait till the action items things.
Okay.
And I'll do that when it comes.
Okay, great. And now we're going to move on to C, Strategic Review Subcommittee, and that's Laura. Do you have anything that you need that you want to talk about?
Madam Chair, we haven't met. We'll meet early next year to formulate the items for the year.
Great, thank you. And we'll go to D, Technical Review Subcommittee. We are going to also discuss that during action items. But Gordon, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nothing I'd like to add at this time, Madam Chair.
We're going to go to the director's report, which is
Thank you, Madam Chair. Been a busy year, and so wanted to highlight a couple of more recent happenings around area agency on aging programs, and kind of some additional planning into the new year. In November, due to the concerns around SNAP benefits, as you know, we do not manage or oversee any SNAP benefits. Our funding is not for SNAP. However, we did, through some of our carryover and unused and unallocated funds that are specific to the what are called C1 and C2 funding sources. That's the congregate meal program and the home delivered meal program, we did have some unallocated funds that we distributed to providers who would be able to get those out to the community in case of that need. A couple of our providers were already recognizing that need, callers or folks coming in and looking for services, even if they weren't already receiving services, but then also those who were already receiving services requesting additional meals just in case. And so we were able to distribute those funds to the providers. Normally, those funds, either as part of carryover or unallocated, are typically distributed after the first of the year based on demonstrated need by our providers and through conversation. And because those are federal funds with as specific parts, those are the only way they can be used. This year, like I said, because of the concerns around individuals and their SNAP funding, we were able to go ahead and distribute those out. A couple of examples were increased emergency food boxes, or what are sometimes called blizzard boxes. They're shelf-stable food items. And we did connect with each of our C2 or home delivery providers who are already under contract to determine their need. They put in their requests. We basically zeroed it out, got it out to those providers so that they can have access to those funds. The same holds true for our C1 contractor, who is Silver Key. They're our only C1 contractor, but did the same thing in case folks, in case the congregate meal program saw an increase, they would have those funds available. So we did zero. So very happy that we could do that, and we were able to do it rather quickly. As Laura mentioned, around the strategic review subcommittee, that is tied to our 4-year area planning process and overall documentation. We are that planning is going to begin soon for the July 2027 start. And it sounds early, but the last 4-year plan that we're currently in was about 14 to 15 month process. And so, excuse me. And so we do anticipate the state directive right after the first of the year. In fact, most recently, it could be any moment. We've heard anywhere between any moment to February. And so we're waiting on that state directive. And that's important. There's a little bit that we can start doing internally from a planning perspective. But that state directive does provide a timeline, required information to have in the report, as well as the parameters and any additional questions or information that they want to see in the annual report. That 4-year report, just for those of you who are new and weren't here for the first one, that is effectively our strategic plan. It highlights priorities that we work with, priorities around our funding, priorities around our outreach, priorities around additional funding. If, say, for example, a grant opportunity came before us, and we would recognize that it's a priority item, that is yet another reason why we might take a grant or seek that out. And so it is a strategic plan, but we're proud to say that the state has recognized that we actually look at it on a quarterly basis, along with Laura and the Strategic Review Subcommittee from an operational standpoint. So very proud that they have recognized that we utilize them. All 16 AAAs are required to do a 4-year plan. That gets turned in early in 2027, and then the state does combine our reports information along with theirs to speak into the state aging. So more to come as we wait for those directives, but we're already starting to have those conversations with the state in some of our regular. I want to also highlight, this is about the time of year that we will be talking about participation or attendance at the Legislative Caucus on Aging, which is held for 4 months of the legislative season, January through April. At this time, it looks like there may be some changes coming around the Legislative Caucus on Aging. So as we hear more about that, we will share that. We don't know really what that's going to look like yet, but as we know more, and especially if there are opportunities for individuals to testify on anything that related to aging services and that kind of thing, we would certainly invite you to have a road trip to Denver with us. But fortunately, the legislation, the legislators have now created an online opportunity for testifying as well. So we can talk about that further. If you're ever interested in participating, I'd love to have and be able to coach you along and be in that opportunity. So again, more to come on that. And then just want to wish everyone a very happy holidays and Merry Christmas and New Year's. The PPACG and AAA offices will be closed on the 24th and 25th, as well as January 1st. And so if you're trying to track one of those things, just know those 3 days will be closed. That's all I have at this moment, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Judy. Now we'll move on to F, which is our legislative query. And you'll note in your packet, you received some information. So let's go over some of that.
Good morning, everyone. Jared Verner, Public Policy and Communications Manager. I'm not going to spend a whole lot on that packet. That's just our federal bill tracking sheet. Not a whole lot of changes since the last time we met, but kind of going back a little bit to the last time we met as the Regional Advisory Council, just to kind of level set on how much has happened. Last time we were here, the government was about halfway through their shutdown, and the governor had not yet introduced his budget proposal. So a lot of things have happened, especially on the budget side, in the last couple of months. I'm going to start on the state side. General Assembly will get things rocking and rolling on January 14th, 2026. So we got a couple of weeks left until the fund really starts underneath the Gold Dome. But the Joint Budget Committee has already been hard at work for the last month or so. Right now, they're meeting with various departments and offices just to go over the budget needs and quite honestly, probably identifying areas for reduction. The last budget forecast had about $800 million deficit in the state. The next budget forecast is due tomorrow, so we should get a little bit better picture and what we're looking at. But in the governor's budget proposal, based on the last budget forecast, he did not have any cuts to older Coloradans Act funding, which is very important. No increase, but based on where the state is financially, I think no decrease is a win for us. So we're going to be advocating for that. Obviously, if we can get more, that's always nice. Funding has been flat, as you all know, for about the last decade or so, while costs have done nothing but rise in that same time. And so, but in looking at the rest of the governor's proposal, there's also senior homestead tax exemption, which he is proposing to fund, but that is through the sale of Pinnacle Insurance, which kind of introduces a whole different can of worms that the legislature is going to have to iron out and how that looks moving forward. There have not been any easy budget decisions for the last couple of years. I think that would be the same case going into this year as well. Some other things, we are starting to see some initial bill drafts either through our lobbying team at the state level or through media reports. And so we're starting to get an idea of where the legislature is going for 2026. But again, nothing will be introduced and actually filed. So it's all still very much a draft form, but we're at least getting ideas on what legislators are looking to do. We actually had a good conversation with legislators about a month ago. We had 8 of them from our local delegation in the room and had a really good discussion. I think we budgeted an hour and a half. We had one closer to 2.5 hours with them, just to kind of talk about what what's important to us and what they're looking at proposing for the upcoming session and what they're hearing, what they're hearing from other members of their delegations. Probably no surprise at the state level, 2026 is going to be a big election year. Every executive office is going to be up for grabs with all the current office holders currently term limited. And we've got several members of the General Assembly who have already announced campaigns to run for several of those executive office seats or congressional seats or whatever. But there's going to be a lot of campaign language coming out the floor, even though they can't campaign, but there will be some messaging coming off the floor and in committees. And then just awareness, just because this seems to be happening with more and more frequency, but just awareness when the session comes in 2026, roughly, my last count, roughly 27 of them will have been appointed through a vacancy process, which means they were not elected by their constituents in their districts. So it's just, it plays into the dynamic of what we look at the underneath the gold dome at that state level. I'm going to pause there. That's my state update. Happy to answer any questions before jumping into the federal side. Ready, got everyone nice and excited for January 14th. That's what I like to hear. So federal side, they did reopen about a month ago now, but the next funding deadline is going to be the end of January. In that time, the Congress has passed 3 of the 12 appropriations bills. So to compare to federal and state level, the state budget bill is one long bill. It's actually called the long bill, but all the budget is in that one long bill, plus some orbitals, but one bill. At the federal side, there's 12. 3 of those have gone through. That means there's still 9 left. That would be subject to a shutdown at the end of January if those funding proposals, if those appropriation bills don't make it through. We're continuing to hear a lot of rumbling, but no concrete evidence that there's about a package of, I hear anywhere from like 4 to 7 of the remaining 9 appropriations bills that could go through. If it's on those lower end, you might hear it called a minibus. And if they get all of them through, you hear the omnibus term thrown around. But we are hearing consistently that the Older Americans Act funding through the HHS budget would be part of that minibus omnibus package at the end of January. This is the last day of the session for Congress so far, so they will be back in session the first full week of January. So we're not expecting anything to happen until after the holiday break. But just awareness, obviously during the last shutdown, while the shutdown is not ideal, we're able to pull funds down, we're able to do some things to be able to maintain service level. But obviously the longer it runs, as Julie referenced, it becomes harder and harder for some organizations to keep that up. And I'll just mention, although there's no new update, S2120 at the federal level, that's the Older Americans Act Reauthorization Bill, has not moved. The national organization that we're a part of has been really working that a lot more and has kind of said like they're working it rather than making a huge advocacy push it from AAA's and everything. So that's the federal update. Having any questions there? Alrighty. That's all I got, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to G, which is my RAC chair report. I don't really have a big report. I just want to say that it's been my honor to serve as your chair for 24, and that I will probably begin the meeting in January because we are not voting on officers until early January. And then whoever has been appointed the new chair probably take. So again, I want to thank everybody. It's great. During these 2 years, we have a lot of new members, which is fabulous. And we have people actually attending our meetings, which is wonderful to see. So thank you all for attending. Okay, Lou, I don't think we have any discussion. So we'll move on. We'll move on to 6, which is action items. And again, we have 2 action items to do. And Melissa's going to do the first one, the membership vote.
All right. So in lieu of Jen, your membership chair, not being able to make the meeting today because it was rescheduled and her schedule conflicted. So I'm going to share, we do have 2 new members to vote in today. So we are pleased to have Lakita Allen here with us today from Department of Human Services. I'm going to ask her to come up here in a minute. And then also Scotty Bibb, who is with the Independence Center. So Scotty couldn't make it today, but hopefully starting in January, we'll see her. So in a few minutes, we're going to ask for someone to move to approve both of them, unless there's comments to discuss each of them separately. But hopefully we'll be able to do that here shortly. And so Lakita, I am going to have you kind of come up and kind of just introduce yourself briefly and share a little bit about your role at Department of Human Services and kind of how long you've been there and what you're going to do for Christmas or the holidays.
Hello, pleasure to be here. Lakita Allen. I am one of the adult services managers at Department of Human Services. I oversee adult protective services. I have 3 teams. And then I also oversee adult intake, which is 2 teams of about 24 staff, and they actually process long-term care applications, SNAP, and cash assistance. I have no idea what we're doing for Christmas. It's really all about the kids for me and really the truth about Christmas. Other than that, I've been with the agency for 17 years. I started out as a processor myself. Then I was a supervisor over the med and SNAP programs, and then adult manager. Thanks, Madam.
Add a dynamic to those folks that are in this committee. You can talk about some things that we hear about and read about what's going on in SNAP and stuff like that. And I think it's a lot of information.
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for? All right. Well, with that, I'd like to have someone motion to approve both of the applicants unless there's questions, but please. And a second.
This is Laura Chronic. I move to approve the 2 applicants.
Don Kowalski, and I second that motion.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Sheila. All right, any, no, in favor. Okay, all right, well, with that, I'm going to give Lakita a second just to grab your materials and sit down over there next to that. Right. Yep, all right. Thanks, everyone.
And our second action item is to talk a little bit about the TRS committee and what the issues were regarding funding issues, and then we will go to public comments for the issues. And Jody is going to do.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just as a reminder, we'll do, I'll get through the presentation and recommendations, and then we'll open that for public comment. And just a reminder, that's a 3-minute public comment, and then we'll go to discussion and wrap up well. So I thought I would start off, since we do have several new members who have not set in on the funding allocation process. I thought I'd provide some background. Welcome, Lakita. Yes, thank you. So in fact, that's the very beginning. How I want to start is, first of all, we have 4 scheduled. One was not able to join us, but Debbie Levinston-Cavich, B. Babbitt, and Gordon Rick served on the TRS subcommittee, reviewing the request for proposals along with staff. And I do want to thank them. This is a heavy lift. It's a big expectation, and we do want to thank everyone for their time. And for those of you in the room, you can see I'm still seated at the main table, so I can access my stacks here as we get into the presentation and questions and that kind of thing. But just wanted to thank them based on their submission of their hours, which is a huge help towards our in-kind requirements for our funding. There were over 30 hours invested in this process on their own. So we want to thank three of you very much for participating in that. We also had staff time ahead of that meeting that we worked on this in several small meetings within specific program areas for an accumulation of over approximately 60 hours. And so there's a lot, I just couldn't recognize the amount of work that this process does take. As we get started, all of you have completed the conflicts of interest document, and so I want to thank you for doing that. Under the new regulations, I do have to highlight the process and the voting. Because we do not vote on the line by line items within the recommendations, but we vote across the full recommendation. At this time, I do need to ask anyone who may have a conflict of interest related to sitting on board or a relationship, personal or business, with any of our requested applicants to raise your hand so that so we have Laura raising her hand, and I think let's see, a Gordon and Clark, and so thank you very much. With that recognition, we do allow our full board to vote across because we do go across the full recommendation. And so acknowledging that and presenting that before the full board is important. New part of the federal conflict of interest change. So thank you for letting me get that housekeeping out of the way. So when we talk about our funding overall, this year, we do anticipate, because we did move from flat funding from last year into this year, which this current fiscal year began July 1 of 2026. Part of our funding conversations are really an expectation of they will likely be flat or possibly even lower. As Jared mentioned, with the state funding, while there is no immediate action to reduce the Older Coloradans Act, which in the bill statute level as a state fund for senior services. So if you hear us use those, we sometimes use that language interchangeably. There's no intention to reduce those that allocation, but we still have 4 months of the legislative season to work through. At the federal level, though, while there are recommendations across several of the funding parts of increases, they are very small. For example, in one funding part, there's a recommendation across the United States, they have a $4 million increase. By the time we get through the Administration for Community Living into the state units on aging and into 620 AAAs, and then those services across the state, 4 million. There is a lot of work going on at that federal level, and I was sharing with someone earlier that there's going to be an increase in that advocacy level. And if there are opportunities for our providers as well as our RAC members to submit letters of encouragement to increase the funding, that we will be sharing that, much like we did last year about this time as we were working on the reallocation of the Older Americans Act. So do know that we will share those opportunities. Many times they come with template letters and phone numbers, lists of your legislators and that kind of thing. From our point, we do try to provide as much information to make that a relatively easy ask for you to engage in at the state level as well. So for those of you who may not be aware, our funding does come to us at the federal level through parts, very specific usage allowed within those parts. And so if you ever want to look at that list with me, you are most welcome. That is public documents, but we do have very specific areas of funding allowed and how it may be applied to services requested. And this year, based on the anticipated flat funding, because, and even from just a planning standpoint, it's important for us to start at a plan flat in the current allocation. because we won't receive our funding allocation until the springtime. There's a lot of work to be done to get contracts ready and so that we have a continuation of funding and services as we begin a contract. So it's July 26th. So what we'll do is what we've recommended is that flat funding overall in our starting number that we worked with was $5,896,652. That is in your packet. The very last page, you'll see that number. Through the allocation recommendations, both at the staff level and at the TRS level, when we got together last week, we allocated all but 89,774. And that represents a split. Some of that is reserve funding, but also some of that is 3C funds to blend with possible carryover in the fall or during what we call an open transfer process in July. State and the feds allow us to transfer funds between Part B, which are general services, as well as Part C. So sometimes if we don't need those funds, if we don't anticipate needing those funds, we can move those out of the C area, which is nutrition programs, into Part B, which gives us more flexibility to use those across all areas. The challenge is that's expected to be done within, we have to do that within the first few weeks of the contract period. So we have to plan ahead, and we make a lot of those decisions based on between the RFP requests, the spin down within the current year, because we do the Administration for Community Living opens that for a very brief window for us to make that change at the very beginning of the contract cycle. I will say we've been really pleased with our providers contracted with the spin down. Ultimately, the federal government can choose not to provide carryover funding, and the state has the authority to reduce any carryover funding to be distributed. And so our providers have done a really good job of reducing your carryover and really truly spending down appropriately within the fiscal year, which allows us to reduce the possibilities of being capped, staying in the carryover conversations, carryover change. So because we don't get the funding, the actual funding allocation until typically April or May, it is after the legislative season to the state level. And then they blend that with the federal allocation that comes to us. We have to work from today's number. So what that means from a funding recommendation and voting process is today we will be asking for an approval of the recommendations to be brought before the Board of Directors in January. That's the PTC2 Board of Directors. And when I make that presentation, that is what we call a contingent. We're asking for their approval to allow us to move forward with the contracting process based on those numbers, and then ultimately firm those up once we receive the actual allocation. Again, this allows us to move forward with our contracting process, to be ready and on time to present contracts to our providers, typically early June, and then have a July 1 solid contract start date, which means that we have the program and funding continuity that we see. We don't want our older adults going without services because there's no contract. So we work really hard to ensure that we can get that. So as I mentioned, in this past, it's actually this current fiscal year which started July 1 of 2025. We, despite the reduction in funds, which was about $104,000, we funded providers nearly flat. Some providers opted to either reduce some of their programming or eliminate programs. But our goal was to bring our providers back to flat in the pre-bill based on this cycle. And so the AAA, our department, our services, staff, and all of our programs took the hit, took the bulk of that funding reduction. We were able to backfill that a little bit with the carryover funds that we got the rest of the carryover funds, nutrition side out to our providers. So overall, the funding recommendations are based on 4-year plan program priorities, talked about earlier, evaluation scores and application scores, as well as the funds spend down history. We also review fiscal and program assessment results and ongoing monthly reimbursement process, our overall grant and requirements performance, data entry and documentation procedures, and overall contractual fulfillment. So all of that is taken into consideration in our supporting process, and it's part of the conversations. I will highlight that as we anticipate, because we just have to plan. We have to put the plan in place now that if funding is reduced. We are already having conversations that we would need to address funding by priority level. So that conversation is already in process, so that you're aware of. And we received RFPs from all 17 current providers, as well as 3 new applicants. And so I want to highlight that if you have your packet and those providers, as I said, all 17 current providers. Excuse me. We had 3 new applicants. One is called GoGo Technologies. They run the GoGo Grandparents Transportation Program. Porchlight Friends, which is a community partner, but we have not contracted with them directly in the past. And a new organization in this area called Wrinkle Friends. They do socialization activities, and they put in requests for transportation. And so I wanted to highlight those 3. They are in alphabetical order within your packet. And so we'll touch a little bit more on those 3 organizations. So I wanted to go ahead and highlight the service lines. As you can see, the requested number. In fact, if you go to the bottom of your page, the total request, that is a number that a few years ago we started asking our providers, don't apply for what you think you might get. Don't apply for what you did last year, assuming that you'll be able to get the same amount again. We have asked our providers to apply for the funds and demonstrate the needs as those programs have grown and as the need across the community and their individual communities and service lines. And that might come from a recognition of expansion of programs and needs in the community. It might also address wait lists that may be in process with the providers. And so we have asked them to apply with that in mind, because ultimately that helps when we're talking from an advocacy standpoint to really demonstrate the needs. And so that has consistently over the last several years been around 8.5. We have been able to express that to our state units on that state unit on aging. When they either they, as part of their documentation process, or if they are asked by administration of community living, what do you feel is the real need? What do you feel is the real financial number? And we can give that, because this is this process to be able to have this information and show that need across. And 6 million of that comes from the providers directly, the folks that we contract with. So that's very important to understand why in your packet you see a requested line and then what was approved. The approvals were based on, like I said, a blend of past awards, scoring, and ultimately allowing this to meet the funds that we anticipate. So when we think about what that is going to look like in the spring, when we receive our actual allocation, if funding is lower than the current year, a couple of scenarios could take place. There could be a situation where we reduce funding across a full request, or if there's significant cuts in specific parts where we would have to cut funding into programs based on the funding part and priorities. So the TRS conversation could continue based on whatever that funding looks like. But if it's flat, or if it's at least flat, then we have the tools to move forward with that. So what I'd like to do is just kind of highlight our current providers and then introduce you to the three applicants and why the staff made recommendations and the TRS approved these recommendations moving forward in the distinctions with us. The first I'd like to highlight is GoGo Technologies. You can see there they asked for $450,000. That is a service anticipated that we'd like to pilot and test across all three counties with a $50,000 recommendation. I do also want to highlight that this is a program that could be actually used by all of our current providers as well as the general public. And so that will actually, mentioning that will actually be something that we'll touch on in just a moment with a couple of other requesters. But we do want to highlight that we would like to pilot this program and this agency to determine suitable to provide some additional transportation across all three units. And so, like I mentioned, their primary name is GoGo Technologies, but they also have programs that travel across the U.S. and just in Denver for some time called GoGo Grandparents. So if you've heard of that program name, that's what it is. The next that I'd like to highlight that applied for funding is Porchlight Friends. Now, like I mentioned, we're a community partner with them. They are actually the new owners of the Pearls program. And so the Pearls program does fall under the Porchlight Friends ownership. However, it's completely separate and separately funded program. So Porchlight Friends did submit a request for $75,450. What we are made recommendations for with the TRS, there's no direct contract or funding recommended here, is that we would like to recommend that they access the GoGo Technologies account and use that to transport their clients. But then also with the caregiver respite and homemaker programs, we'll be encouraging them to actually apply to be one of our maker and respite program providers within AAA. So not applying these funds into the rest of the West, but encouraging them to join our network that we manage. There's so much of we would do that within the funds that we already have allocated for those programs. So that does, right now we do those kind of programs through voucher, and it is a client choice system, which We do all the legwork, we verify the home care provider, and then the individual qualifies for the voucher. They then select from the list of approved providers. And so we're going to be making that recommendation, and TRS has approved that. The last is a group, a brand new group, like I mentioned, in Colorado Springs called Wrinkle Friends. They did apply for transportation dollars. As mentioned, they are a brand new organization. We'll be making recommendations that while we really like their program, that we would like to see them have a little more program information and experience, and perhaps apply in a future RFP period. They did reach in social engagement opportunities, which is, as we all know, that's why we're here. This is a big part of what we do, but we feel we need to see more experience and more information from them for future, for potential future application. And so with that, what I'd like to do is, like I mentioned, we will open this for public comment. If there's anyone here who would like to submit public comment, please come to the podium, raise your hand. Looks like we have Tamara Estes, who is the chair of the board of directors for the Fountain Valley Senior Center. We'll start with her. And then Jason has his hand up. Jason with Silver Key. We'll give him an opportunity as well. So,
Jody, if I can interrupt, for
Yes.
anyone who's online, this is Chair, by the way, for anyone who's online, like by public comment, please go and use the raise hand function right now. That'll start queuing up anyone online, like by public comment. And so that we don't have to wait. We just go jump to those people online.
thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Estes. There'll be a, oh, gotcha. Okay. There's a clock on your screen. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Chair, members of the Regional Advisory Council, staff, and visitors. My name is Tamara Estes, and I serve as the president of the board of directors for the Fountain Valley Senior Center. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you today. I'm coming to talk to you about the reduction in funding for the Fountain Valley Senior Center. We are here to fight for every dollar we can get. We are providing critical services, and it's very important that we're fighting for every dollar we can get. Compared to what the money we had from last year, we will be facing almost a 65% cut in our funds. And I feel for all of you that have to make these decisions, because as funding becomes tighter and tighter, they're very difficult decisions that we have to make. I've been in these positions of having to choose who gets what. But I'm just, like I said, I'm going to here advocate for our seniors. At the outset, I want to acknowledge that I have provided a packet of information to the board members for transparency, context, and a complete record. That packet includes this statement in a letter form. The most recent 2025 PPACG audit, our written response, a spreadsheet analysis of transportation funding requests pulled from the RAC documents with a very limited analysis, and a suggested process improvement for how funding requests are reviewed. First, we want to be clear and transparent. We readily acknowledge we have not done everything perfectly. We are a very small nonprofit serving a growing senior population. And when concerns are identified, we work in good faith to improve administrative practices, documentation, and internal processes. As part of that commitment, we are currently working with an external consultant to strengthen our internal practices and expand sustainable funding opportunities. These steps are proactive, corrective action, and they demonstrate our intent to build long-term sustainability and accountability. What is deeply concerning is the process that led to this reduced funding recommendation. We were not notified prior to the TRS meeting that staff intended to place us on probation or recommend punitive measures. There was no advance notice, no formal corrective process, no meaningful opportunity to respond before those actions were threatened or taken. That undermines basic fairness, especially when major funding reductions are already being contemplated. Compounding this, Mr. Barker has acknowledged that recent improvements have been made. Given that, punitive actions now are ill-timed and troubling. Punitive measures should be the last resort, especially when progress is being demonstrated and corrective efforts are being taken they're underway. Oversight should support improvement and compliance, not penalize good faith efforts. The proposed funding decrease will not solve these issues. It will likely exacerbate them, limiting our ability to strengthen systems, retain qualified staff, and meet compliance expectations. More importantly, it directly harms the seniors we serve. People who rely on us for meals, transportation, social connection, and critical supportive services. These transportation dollars are greatly needed. Mr. Barker has acknowledged that the need is great. Finally, we have been told that the scoring is objective. Much of the rationale presented relied on subjective staff impressions rather than documented standards or measurable criteria. This concern was compounded because there was no clear discussion of total funds available, whether for transportation per category. We're not competing against homemaking funds. We're not competing against counseling funds.
Ms. Estes, that's 3 minutes.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate it. And I really encourage you to please don't cut us.
Thank you very much. Lakita's gonna come over and help. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate your input. Jason DeBueno with Silver Key. And while he's coming up, Jared, do you see anyone online? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Jason, 3 minutes.
So flat is the new high. And so with that, one thing I want to share with you is that Silver Key has the intention of really making sure that you understand that when you make a decision about the way the funding gets spread through all the different partners and Silver Key itself, we have to step back and really understand impact, because we certainly can talk a lot about output. We can talk about the number of people we serve, how we serve, and the great things that we do. But one of the things that we've learned is the best way to demonstrate impact is to give you empirical reason for you to think about keeping the funding coming through the community the way it has. And what we've done is we've adopted the HOPE scale, which is an internationally recognized scale that talks about one's hope. It's recognized, statistically valid and reliable. And so what happens is when you increase somebody's hope, you decrease ER, emergency room, 911 calls. And we have been in partnership with the Colorado Springs Fire Department, which is one of the funded entities, and a past entity, NAMI Colorado Springs, and we expanded the services. So we had an independent reviewer demonstrate that when you get involved with Silver Key, your hope increases, and we decrease 911 and emergency room use unnecessarily. So for every dollar invested, you actually gain $5 of taxpayer benefit because of the reduction of Medicaid and Medicare use. So that investment that happens with Silver Key is significant for this community. It saves this community about $25 million with the entity that we are in that $5 million support. That said, one of the things that I brought forward in the past, and I'll bring it forward again this time just for your consideration, there are a number of providers that do not maybe have the resource to be able to do a scaling and understanding of the outcomes. I can confidently say that every partner that we've talked with, whether it's Kathy up north, I met with Susie Walton, right, not north, west, and then Susie far, far west, Mark to the south. All of these entities demonstrate hope, and they may not have the criteria to be able to set up and get an independent study the way that Silver Key was able to. But I can confidently say this: when we've connected, the core of what Silver Key does in meeting the needs of older adults cascades through all the Tri-Lakes there, or the Tri-County area and Tri-Lakes. And so for that reason, I share that when you hear the plea of all these different organizations that are struggled with this new funding recommendation, I would ask you to step back and think about a new entity coming on board. Go Thanks. Yeah, I want to keep saying go grandma, but that was one from the other. That's another example, I think, of where, yes, it may make the right sense with the prioritization, but you have three major funding entities right now, Fountain Valley, Silver Key, and Evita, that are all working to meet the transportation needs in this community. And with that, I would just ask you to think, does it make sense to bring a new innovation or help support the three to be able to meet what we do every day to increase hope and then to be able to expand innovation through what already exists? We're committed to innovate because we think that our older adults in this community deserve it. And in the Tri-Lakes Tri-County community, Silver Key is committed to be able to support any other organization that would like to partner with us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Jason, and thank you for the public comments and that input. One thing that I did not touch on and that I'll share, each as part of the request for proposal packages, those are the applications, the RFPs that we're talking about. Each provider within that packet did see the performance evaluation metric, which was used to score. And so these are very specific to the monthly report submissions, program responsiveness, policy and procedure, compliance, and that sort of thing. And they're very specific. Our goal is not to make this subjective, but to make this objective. And actually has, for example, within the monthly report submissions, their score is reduced if they have 1 to 2 later incorrect submissions or 3 to 4 later incorrect submissions. Very specific scoring that was used as part of the RFP packet. So I do want to, I did want to make sure that the RAC was aware of the scoring and how our scoring, the staff scoring, this was fiscal as well as program review. And then the TRS members, as part of their many hours on their own, also had a scoring sheet based on their read of the RFPs and were able to provide scoring as well. So all of that went into the process. So we are, it's 11:35, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And so just want to open for any questions, comments, anything from the team, the TRS team. I see Gordon, you have your hand up and light on, and Madam Chair, if you like, I'll go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
So a couple questions. First, as you mentioned, TRS did scoring based off of the applications. When I got here and I turned in my scores, staff had already come up with numbers of what they were going to recommend before they even saw our scoring. What exactly was or is our scoring being used for if you've already made your recommendations?
Sure. Sure, thank you for that question. So the scoring and the recommendations were based on the score sheet that I just mentioned. This is the performance, this is specifically the contractual performance evaluation metric that was used to have very specific areas of service. The information that was collected from the TRS members was calculated at the beginning of the meeting and was then shared with the TRS members at the meeting, and then was referred to in the conversation as from comparison standpoint and that kind of thing.
But it didn't have any effect on your recommendation as to who gets what money.
That was where the TRS members could make those adjustments and recommendations.
Okay. But when we saw the recommendations, they were by organization, not funding category. So it's hard for me to make a recommendation, for example, for meals or for counseling, if I'm looking at it by organization rather than here's the bucket of money and here's what we allocated. So I would recommend in the future that, when we're looking at this, not look at it from a standpoint of Fountain Valley Senior Center or Silver Keys or Invita requesting this money. It's, here's all our money that's allocated in this bucket, and here's who we recommend to go. Just some feedback for you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And that's the kind of feedback that we like to hear and recommendations. I will say that because the federal funding is by part in those buckets, as we talked about, for example, in this case, since this is the topic within transportation, that is within the 3B dollars and is not designated specifically for transportation. Transportation comes out of those 3B dollars, which are general services, but also the state funding, which comes in one bucket. And so it's that is part of the puzzle that we put together, and that's how we bring the recommendations before the TRS. So, but thank you for that feedback. So might be something, can't make a decision right now on that, but looking at future contract.
We did discuss each provider individually.
Yes. Yes.
Just to note that, and I think maybe we didn't discuss that enough, or questions weren't asked enough about each of those things. But for example, I think B and I have been on, we know what those areas are that would come out of separate buckets, and maybe we needed to discuss that over each individual one.
So
Thank you for that.
So when you said we're making a recommendation to the executive committee, and the executive committee is going to approve contingent budget. When we do get the actual numbers from the state, from the federal government, which I believe you said were sometime April-ish.
April, May, generally.
Does that, once you get the final numbers, does that come back to us or the executive committee, or you guys just go off of what you've already got?
Yeah, so because we are asking the PPACG Board of Directors for that contingent vote, we do come back around full circle to finalize. And it really depends on what those final numbers look like. They could make a severe drop in any individual part. In this case, the current year that we're in, funding dropped in every federal part, and there was a teensy tiny $5,000 increase in the state funding. So our net was a loss, like I said, of $104,000. But we do bring the final recommendations back to the board of directors typically as we get once we get that and finalize what those numbers look like based on the part and current processes.
And finally, how do we notify applicants of what their funding is going to be? When do they get notified, and is there an appeal process?
Sure. So right now, we'll go through the contingent vote process to the board of directors. Once the actual funding allocations come in from the state, and we know what that is, so we can plan accordingly for the contract process. The providers will typically get an email with their funding, and then they will also receive the contract to review and make sure still matches what they applied for, or if there are changes that need to be taking place, because this isn't just a flat funding situation. Of course, all of this ties to the actual units, the cost per unit. So any adjustments based on the final recommendation of funding versus what they applied for, they are given time to make those adjustments to make sure that their planning meets the contract.
But are they allowed to appeal the decision? And if so, how does that work?
Sure. And then that's in the RFP. That's basically just a direct email to me. They can submit it by letter, they can submit it by email. Either way is fine. It comes to me, and they are welcome to do that effective today.
Okay, and then what happens once you get it?
Well, we review it as staff. We review it. If we get one, we will recall the TRS. That's why the TRS doesn't have a specific cycle. It's based on the need. So we'll recall the TRS. Our hope is that we can continue on the contract road so that we don't disrupt the July 1 start date, because we don't want to interrupt our programs or the funding cycles. But there is that opportunity. Like I said, that's effective today as of this meeting.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for right now. I might have some more later, but I want to give everybody else an opportunity.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, Laura.
I have a series of questions. I'm going to ask you first to whip out that magic crystal ball. And yeah, you get the picture. Is there any anticipation? Do you have any crystal ball result from federal funding, given the current environment, given the, yeah. Have you looked at that? Have you anticipated? Is there a different number have you gone through a series of numbers? I mean, you know, there's no way to make this happen magically. I know that. But, and you've indicated that there is a process in place for staff to do this at various levels. How comfortable are you with all of that?
The reality is that we have to plan using today's numbers because we have no indication whatsoever. Like I said, there have been advocacy efforts to increase various areas of priority services at the federal level. One of those is family caregiver programs. Another is the ombudsman program. But as I mentioned in my scenario earlier, it's not I can't remember if it's one of those two or yet another program. The overall recommendation at the national level is an increase of $4 million. You really put that in the funnel and bring it down to the regional level. We just don't know. That's, Laura, quite frankly, that's the part that gives me heartburn in my job, because we don't know. We know, and as acknowledged by Ms. Estes and her, and what I said, the need is great across the community. We see that, and there are a couple of areas of planning that we are doing. A is to reduce the possibility that we will not be able to sign and have signed contracts July 1, so that there's no disruption in services or reimbursements. That's crucial. That's why we do it. You know, here we are setting in December, thinking about July, and it's so important because it's such an extensive process. And at any time, the administration of community living or the state unit on aging can say, we want you to change this, we want you to change that. And we have to make sure that we're giving ourselves enough time, enough buffer to manage those changes. But also, when we think about those possible changes and that possible funding, ultimately, we recognize that there are specific Older Americans Act priority services, among which transportation is one of those, because that is an ongoing conversation. That is a high level priority with your plan. We recognize that, we acknowledge that. But the list that I was talking about earlier, we're working on prioritizing our services across the region in case that funding is not flat. If it is lower, how do we recognize and fund as best possible within the funding parts and expectations of the Older Americans Act the highest level priorities, and which ones we removed in of course, we're in the back half of the current 2-year contract period. In this conversation, nearly 2 years ago, it's February of 2024, we made recommendations, and TRS agreed with us to remove a couple of service lines because they're all very important services, but we have to consider the priorities as they relate to the Older Americans Act. And so we did not fund those services. And reality is that we may be all now until April or May, when the state releases the federal funding in the state.
Personally, I've seen it handled very well from my perspective. Um, when you do something across the board, sometimes that's the only way, rather than cherry picking or nitpicking or, eliminating. That's can seem very subjective rather than objective. And since, to my next question, this is very process driven. I am a process person, so I love it. But there are always exceptions in the process. I heard what Tamara said, and that begged the question for me. When something comes up, how is it handled such that this particular group of people isn't penalized by not following the process or having the process interrupted by anybody? And I'm not pointing fingers, I'm not laying blame. It's just, we're all human. We all make mistakes. How is that handled here so that the people that are served by the monies that are expended aren't penalized?
Sure. So that's where we use this performance evaluation. We track those changes. And like I said, this evaluation is very specific. And so it's all documented within our internal programs and processes to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of the Federal Older Americans Act. We're meeting the requirements of the state level Older Coloradans Act and the expectations of the use of the state fund for senior services. We are subject to some of the same situations. The state could come in and say, we're continuing to see this organization not submitting their documentation in time, not doing their funding. If we miss it, we get dinged. If the organization misses it, the state or the federal partners could actually say, you're not allowed to provide services through that contractor anymore. We don't want that to happen. We do a lot of coaching and support of our providers across all areas. That's small, large, we still have Silver Key represented here. Whether it is a large organization or a very small organization, our goal is to ensure that they can meet the state and federal requirements of the contract and be contractually meeting those contractual obligations. Because if we don't, someone else can come around behind us. Like I said, the state or the feds can come around behind us and say they can't contract with you anymore because they can't meet the contractual obligations. So we do a lot of coaching. That's in person, that's with various staff members. And our goal is to ensure that those organizations can improve. That is also a part of why we have some of the reserve fund to see that, because we have to base the performance evaluation on the previous fiscal year. That's what we're going. But as we look into this current fiscal year, which we're by almost 6 months through, we can raise the positive of, hey, we've got a really positive outcome from this provider. We're seeing these improvements in data entry or the fiscal, turning in fiscal or reimbursement reports accurate and on time. And we have those discussions within staff, both from a program and a finance perspective, to make sure that we're staying closely aware of those situations or concerns, and we will respond to them.
My final comment is a recommendation. We're given this spreadsheet, if you will, and of course, again, I'm a data person, I love the spreadsheet, but this is all we have got. We don't know what happened with the TRS, understand all the process, but would it be possible to include where you have a total for a provider. Do a 2 or 3 bullet, very succinct summary of what went into the decision, particularly when one of two things happens. Either the number is increased from last year substantially or from the past, or decreased substantially, so that there's some kind of an understanding about what happened.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I appreciate that. While we didn't have that in written form, that is part of the TRS process where we go line by line and describe the recommendations. So, yeah,
But for the benefit of the rec, the people that haven't seen, didn't hear, just, a couple of bullet points that gives it an essence of what y'all went through, because yeah, hours and hours. I did last year.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Jody, I want to mention, you didn't mention, for example, Brothers Redevelopment and City of Colorado Springs. Those two were new last year. And one we kept at exactly the same as 50,000, and we raised Brothers Development, but you can see from what they've requested, it's significantly lower. So because they're still new, I think that we're still looking at to mention that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the GoGo Tech. Jason, some left, but with GoGo Technologies, also that money, 50,000. I mean, I think he was relating that to his transportation money that he gets, but GoGo Technologies will be able to cross boundaries. Like somebody in Colorado Springs, in El Paso County, who may need to go to Denver for something or a medical, GoGo Technologies might be able to provide that transportation. And so that's one of the reasons that we funded them, even at that small amount, because I think we feel that they may be able to expand the services that people are getting in all three of them.
I'll make a slight adjustment.
Okay.
All of our current providers may cross boundaries. In fact, Silver Key and Teller Senior Coalition are good examples of where they're crossing county boundaries from Teller back and forth Teller and El Paso County. Our goal for recommending this minimal compared to what they requested, to really approach this as a pilot situation, because they manage a variety of transportation services. They're not taking over or building out new services. However, the benefit that we see is that they can be used in conjunction with additional services. And so in particular, Park County, they do all of their services within the voucher system, which is what we affectionately refer to as the neighbor to neighbor. So it's what's called client directed. Don needs a ride. He calls his neighbor Jody, can you get me to the doctor next week? And it can be anywhere at any distance. He gives me his approved voucher. I take him to the doctor, I take him home, and then I submit that for my mileage reimbursement. That's what a high synopsis of how that system works. But what if that's not available? What do we need to do across all three counties to make sure that our older adults have access to services? So that's our input. Now, one thing we did talk about is that if approved, and we submit this as to GoGo Technologies, they can say, well, we can't do it. That's too low. That would give us the opportunity then to reallocate those funds. And so that could very well be, that could happen, or they could say, great, we'll operate a pilot for 1 year with that allocation and we'll see how it goes. So there is, that's how that has come about, and what we would like to, we'd like to pilot this. Not saying that our current providers aren't meeting the needs, because the need is great. I keep saying that the need is great, but we're looking for outside of the box kind of opportunities to make sure that our older adults know they have options. And so, again, GoGo can say, no, we can't do that. We would put that into the reserve and have that conversation about how to reallocate those funds. So, yeah, you know, Teller does great things for Park County because part of Park County is closer to Teller County. You know, Lake George is closer to the divide office than others. So I know, and to what Jason mentioned, there are really great partnerships across so many of our providers to make sure that our older adults' needs are met. So.
I feel that it's low. Finding transportation. Taking a look at.
Running a pilot, because they contract out with other providers, the Lyfts and the Ubers and that kind of thing. And so their cost per unit is lower. Again,
That's something TRS
yes,
looked at
we
and
just-
noted and reviewed.
And I do want to just jump in about transportation too, because it has been a struggle for our existing providers and our traditional providers to make those treks outside of, up to Denver and across county lines. And in the last 3 years, there have been a lot of discussions around trying to work through those. And so I think that as we move forward, we're going to be seeing transit providers trying to figure this out better. And, we'll kind of see how that kind of comes out, in the next 2 years. But it has been a challenge. Transportation is a priority, funding is a priority. And, as a community, a 3-county community, we have struggled with figuring out how to get people to Denver. So, as we look at GoGo and we look at our traditional providers looking at their models and trying to figure out how to make it more affordable, I think the next 2 years will be kind of an interesting experiment. So I do, want to acknowledge that it has been a struggle for our traditional providers to figure out how to make it work within our limited funding that we have. So hopefully we're going to continue to see some models come out of all of that. So I did want to say that. I think both B has a comment over there as well, but I wanted to just make that comment about transportation.
Any further questions, comments?
Based off what I've heard, I am not going to be able to vote yes on recommending this package to the executive. I realize it's just a recommendation. Everybody has the right to vote how they wish. But my background is in business, and when I deal with personnel or I deal with other agencies, I am legally required to give them at least 2 notices. Here's a verbal warning, here's a written warning. If you don't do this, here's what the consequences are. I'm not comfortable that process is followed for the agencies that we are getting funds for. I am not comfortable that the TRS scoring recommendations were factored in when staff made their budget. So I just want to make that up front. That everybody's entitled to vote how they want. That's where I'm standing.
Thank you for that input. Any other questions or conversation, discussion? If not, then Madam Chair, I will turn it over to you for the voting process. We'll need a motion, a second.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations from the TRS committee and the staff?
B. Babbitt, I make a motion to approve the TRS report.
Have a second? Okay, I will make a second. Hold on.
Yeah, Dennis for any final discussion.
Do we have any final discussion before we put it up for vote?
Yes, I feel the need to agree with Gordon, and I would also have to vote no.
Mark?
I guess, but being new to this process, frankly, though, if this were not approved to move forward, what would be the next step? It doesn't go to the board.
Yeah, this is,
I understand, but so there won't be, but regardless of what the vote is, it'll still go forward for the,
well, if we do have a majority vote today, it would go to the board of directors, and we do acknowledge any no votes during
Okay.
that process. So they will receive. They'll
they'd have that
receive,
information.
yes, certainly. They will receive the full recommendation packet, which you all received as part of today's meeting. And then I make this presentation to them and acknowledge those no votes or grandparents.
And make a additional comment, and maybe you didn't realize this, Gordy, but within the TRS committee, an individual could have suggested a change in. We did that with.
We did that
other-
with two, yes. With
A couple other
of those.
allocations, whereas members, we can make recommendations for changing.
Correct. So the package that you see in front of you does recognize a couple of changes from staff recommendations.
Any other discussion, comments? We'll bring it to the vote. All those in favor signify raising their hand or saying aye.
And I do want to go slowly so I can note everyone's vote so that I
Okay.
absolutely do not miss any votes here.
Keep our
So
hands-
please keep your hands up.
So, yeah, so if you would raise your hands for the yes vote to approve.
we do have one person online.
Sheila, still online.
She raises her hand.
Is that a,
Thank
is
you,
that a
Sheila.
raised hand for vote? I would like to have a audible.
Would you like me to verbally vote?
Yes, please. So we're taking the motion to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye or raise their hand and hold your hand up if you're in the room.
I think we,
Okay, thank you, Sheila.
Got those.
Okay. Those opposed to proceeding with?
And-
Please keep your hands raised so Melissa can.
And I do want to remind Lakita if she wants to vote or if she would like to abstain because she feels she's still too new. Where are you at with that?
Point of order, she has not been confirmed by the board of directors.
Oh,
yet,
that's right. Sorry.
so She can't vote.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jared.
So is that a 3-3 vote or
No.
4 vote?
It's a 5, 5,
Five.
and 3.
5-3. Okay. So with that, the motion is does pass for presentation to the board of directors. We will make this presentation to the board of directors. And as I mentioned, we do acknowledge, we will acknowledge the vote split. And we will continue to keep you posted as we start having conversations with providers and potential new providers. And we will also call back the TRS if opportunity presents itself. And so again, it is a way for us to continue moving forward in the process to make sure that when the actual allocations do come, we can recognize those and be on task to make sure that we don't have a disruption in our services or funding. So with that, Madam Chair, that concludes item.
meetings.
Yes, please go ahead.
I have one more comment. sorry, for just discussion. I did, forget to mention Rosemary Jaramillo has served her 2 terms with the RAC. I do have a certificate of appreciation for her today. And so today is her last day to move on to other committee work around the community. She's welcome to come back in a year and be a part of us again. But I just wanted to let the rest of the RAC know that today is Rosemary's last meeting with us, and happy holidays and thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Rosemary.
We'll go on to 8. The meeting schedule is there for you to see. And next meeting is January 22nd. The RAC executive meeting is the first Wednesday of each month, and the PPACG is the second Tuesday.
The
Second.
PPACG is the second Wednesday of the month, so I believe that is January 14th. It's coming.
And, yes, do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you.